Hello, everyone, to the latest edition of Anything But Casual. I'm Zachariah, as always. I greatly appreciate you for watching this video. I haven't made one for quite a while because, probably not unlike you, I am very, very busy. But I wanted to make a video to start off the new year. And basically, let's just discuss what the hell is going on in the United States right now, both foreign policy and domestic policy, especially over the last 20 days or so, as I am recording this on January 20th. And foreign policy wise, one of the biggest news stories that we've been talking about lately has been Venezuela, in which on January 3rd, the United States conducted a major operation in Venezuela where we kidnapped Nicolas Maduro and transferred him to the United States to face charges. This has largely been considered by the international community a violation of international law. You can't just go somewhere and conduct a military operation and kidnap their leader because you want to, even if you have charges against them that you think he might have, which are overwhelmingly false. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about that because Nicolas Maduro has not had any substantial evidence brought against him that he is a narco trafficker or that Venezuela is a narco state. There are criticisms of him as a leader. There have been claims that he and his government have been cracking down pretty heavily on protests and opposition, but he was elected democratically as per the Jimmy Carter Foundation. He was allowing oppositional elections, such as the election that occurred in 2020, but was uh, disrupted by an attempt to back an oppositional coup. The United States tried to overthrow Maduro back then. It failed. And of course, this is all very sketchy because it has been very clear and stated pretty openly by the President of the United States, Donald Trump, that the kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro and the current military actions in Venezuela have been to capture their vast supply of oil. Now, this has been widely known for a long time, but there still are some people who say, no, he's a narco terrorist, this was that. So let's just go ahead and disprove this right now. For one of the claims was that Venezuela was trafficking fentanyl into the United States. This isn't true. Fentanyl comes from Mexico, who get their precursors from China. China even admitted this in a recent agreement with the Trump administration. Second, that cocaine was coming from the Venezuelan region into the United States. This is also not true. Most of it comes from Colombia, who has also been recently attacked by the Trump administration. This was all premeditated by illegal attacks on fishing boats and what the United States claimed to be drug traffickers in the region. There was no evidence for that at all. We killed a lot of people, over 50, I believe, for that region. At least one fisherman whose family has come out to file a claim against the United States. So basically, the United States is just doing what we've been doing for forever. And that's why there's no real Democrat opposition to this in the country, other than to try to pass some lame duck War Powers Act, which would make the United States president have to address Congress before doing anything like this again. But this has been tried over and over again over the years. To no real avail. It's typically always been vetoed, and it doesn't matter anyway, because even if Donald Trump had brought this to Congress, the majority of Congress, Democrats included, would have been totally okay with this. This is why even people like Zoran Mandani in New York have been calling Maduro a dictator because even though he called the United States President Donald Trump to say, I oppose this action, he was still anti-Maduro. And it's why people like Jim Hines go on the news and say, we're happy that Maduro's gone, but this should have been done through Congress. It's such a lame criticism. Just the continuation of United States foreign policy, as we're now being told, is the Don Roe Doctrine, an push on of the Monroe Doctrine, I guess. And just another example of the United States foreign policy doing whatever it wants. And we'll explain on this later in this video, from 1953 in Iran to the 1970s in Chile to our actions in Vietnam, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Indonesia. You can go on and on and on. This is what the United States does, right? We just implement our will wherever we want for resources and money. Speaking of Iran, the Iranian government has been struggling a lot recently, and the entire country has been struggling economically for quite some time. For one reason, because of the United States sanctions that have been imposed going back to the post 1979 Iranian Revolution. To understand that, we have to talk about how in 1953, the Eisenhower administration, as well as the British government, overthrew a democratically elected prime minister of Iran because he decided to nationalize their oil and use it for their people instead of foreign interest. Does that sound familiar? Because we just talked about Venezuela, it should. So yeah, so since then, the United States after 1953 implemented the Shah of Iran, who killed tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, and was a brutal regime. And then in 1979, the Iranian government that is currently in place overthrew the Shah and implemented a more religious Islamic state. Since then, the United States has imposed cruel sanctions and escalated tensions with Iran at any given point, especially since Iran is a firm opposition to Israel, since Iranian people and government support the Palestinians and their right to self-determination. The U.S. government has done things such as impose harsh economic sanctions. In the 1980s, they fueled and funded Saddam Hussein's Iraqi war against Iran, in which Saddam Hussein committed horrible acts, war crimes against humanity, and et cetera, and so on. But more recently, Iran has had a couple protests because the Iranian government does have problems with corruption. This is very well known. There's a lot of governmental pocketing of money, not a whole lot of protection for the people under the midst of these sanctions. And it's one thing if the whole country, the elite included, are suffering because of the sanctions, which happens. But there's a problem whenever the middle class and lower classes are suffering because of sanctions, while the upper class is still doing fine. That's kind of why we also are having a lot of unrest in the United States right now, is because we're all suffering down here, but those on top are not. So in Iran, they have seen major nationwide protests and a violent crackdown since late December 2025 to early January 2026. It's mostly kind of dissipated now, but there's still remnants of it. Uh, the United Nations Human Rights Council is having emergency sessions on the alarming violence against protesters. And of course, Donald Trump threatened intervention if Iranian security forces fired on protesters. And it was very clear, or it was very, very close to this apparently, as of last weekend, the weekend of January 17th through the 19th, that possibly Donald Trump might go ahead and attack Iran. And Israel, of course, was pushing greatly for this. Warhawk, Lindsey Graham was pushing greatly for this. If you want to see someone who was absolutely defeated, go ahead and look up Lindsey Graham's most recent videos reacting to the fact the United States decided not to attack Iran for a multitude of reasons. One of which was because most of our warships are off the coast of Venezuela right now, and another one is because if you attack Iran, all these people who are protesting with legitimate concerns against the Iranian government, they probably would go ahead and align with the Iranian government because they don't want a foreign entity uh, telling them what to do. Speaking of foreign entities, Mike Pompeo said that the Mossad was on the ground with the protesters, and the Iranian government has said that they were have evidence that foreign actors as well as agitators were there. Now, this is evidenced through a lot of things, particularly rioting, which disrupted the peaceful protests that most of these people were having. But another one is that mosques were burned. Now, Iran is a predominantly Muslim state. And just like the United States is a Christian state, predominantly, most of us are, we're very diverse in sex and whatnot. You wouldn't burn down a church during your protest. And when that has happened during riots or moments of civil unrest, it has been condemned and criticized by all sides. Now, when it happened in Iran, most people in Iran weren't happy about it either. And the Iranian government has used this to say, hey, our people wouldn't do this. It's very clear that there are agitators here. So keep that in mind when considering it and considering what the United States' next actions against Iran, since we last bombed them in June of 2025 at Israel's behest again for reasons that are sketchy. Uh, so it's a real mess in Iran right now. Partially, if I would say it's like 50% because of the United States sanctions, which were implemented to crush economically Iran and impose things such as starvation and suffering. And it's also because of poor handling by the Iranian government. But just like I wrote in my Venezuela article for Substack a couple months ago, what the Iranian people need is to figure their own situation out and for the Iranian government to be free to figure the situation out without these cruel sanctions and without military action by Israel, the United States. What they don't need is intervention by a foreign entity that will just make things worse. Like what we're seeing in Venezuela. Things are just going to get worse for the people there while the United States has intervened. Same as it got worse for people in Panama, same as it got worse for people in Chile, same as it got worse for people in Nicaragua, Iraq, Afghanistan, and so on. And then finally, the last foreign policy note before we get to the end of the video, where I'll do my usual foreign policy ending. Uh, Greenland. Donald Trump has had an obsession with Greenland, and apparently so did Truman back in 1946. But Donald Trump has had an obsession in acquiring Greenland since his first presidency and is now once again pushing for it. He announced tariffs against main European countries who fought back against his announcement that he would want to take Greenland either the easy way or the hard way, so threatening military force once again. But this time, people have been very concerned about it since it is one of our main allies, mainly Denmark, who we'd be attacking, and that could have catastrophic consequences. Not to mention the catastrophic consequences of a trade war with Europe, who have now been discussing using their option of just cutting off all trade with the United States and not allowing the United States to sell any goods in Europe, which would be very damaging to the United States economy. But Donald Trump has also stated in a message to the Norwegians that part of his reason for going against Greenland and threatening such extreme measures is because he didn't get the Nobel Peace Prize and he has no reason to think in terms of peace anymore, which kind of goes with what we know as Donald Trump as a person. And Greenland is now a new American posturing litmus test. We want this territory for pretty vague, not really substantial reasons. We hear about how China and Russia might have interest in the region, but the majority of it is probably because Greenland has rare earth minerals that are used to make our smartphones and laptops and everything else that we have. And if China or anyone else were to get a hold of these, it would be bad for us since China is currently the number one technology center of the world. But the realistic part of it is China typically does things through trade. Russia really doesn't have any interest since it's currently focused on the Ukrainian conflict and ending that and then seeing where it wants to go. And the real news of it is the United States just wants to control something because it wants to prove that it still is the military powerhouse of the world since they have no other leverage. The United States doesn't have technology, it doesn't have manufacturing, it doesn't have really any trade. The only thing the United States has as leverage anymore is its military strength, and it has been failing it since Vietnam. Yeah. On to domestic policy. ICE has been surging operations, has had no oversight, and has spread widespread fear across communities in the entire country. And then, of course, in this last month of January, the first week, a ICE agent shot an unarmed woman as she was trying to drive away and shot and killed her in Minneapolis. It sparked a lot of protests that are still going on. Once again, the United States president, in response to this protest, after being so pro-protester in Iran, back here in the United States says he's going to use the Insurrection Act and send 1,500 troops to Minneapolis to crack down and shut down any dissent. This is, of course, in line with what the Trump administration wants to do. They don't like dissent when it comes to the United States, but in Iran, if it means they can get their goals, they're absolutely fine. There's been reports from Al Jazeera and The Guardian that the DOJ will not investigate the ICE agent who shot the unarmed woman, Renee Good, and they will not investigate the shooting at all. The FBI, in fact, instead of investigating the ICE agent, they have started targeting the widow of Renee Good and saying that she is a domestic terrorist, as well as Renee Good was a domestic terrorist, even though anyone who watched the video can see Renee Good was trying to drive away and she was shot for virtually no reason. And yeah, so protests are going to continue. And of course, this comes as the DOJ continues to use its power against political enemies, and specifically Jerome Powell, who, after months of fighting the Trump administration, saying he was not going to uh, do what they wanted as it pertains to interest rates, they have announced that they're investigating him. And they are going to continue to try to say that the Federal Reserve is a wing underneath the president and not an independent chair of its own. And Donald Trump has said if the Supreme Court rules against him in this case, he will begin to replace them. He really can't do that, just like he really can't run for a third term and he can't cancel midterm elections. But he's been threatening all of these things and talking about them openly because Donald Trump is scared, very, very scared, that he is starting to lose power. And he is especially scared because he has lost so much public support over the first year of his term that is at almost record lows. So, and that's really what you need to do is you need to continue to get Donald Trump to record lows and then acknowledge that hopefully that'll get some of this policy to at least be blocked since the Democrats aren't really worth anything anyway. What we really need to do is a complete overhaul of the system. But right now, fighting Donald Trump, as my friends told me in 2020, is the most important thing. And Joe Biden's return to normalcy was going to make everything better. Well, everything's not better. Joe Biden made things incredibly worse. He enabled a war in Ukraine and Russia, and he enabled a genocide for Gazans. So maybe the most important thing we needed to do was implement policies that made lives for Americans better, but instead we didn't, and now here we are. That brief rant aside, finally, let's go ahead and talk about Gaza. Gaza has been sold out by the United Nations Security Council, who, after decades of uh, writings and rulings that what needed to happen for peace in the Middle East and for the conflict of Israel-Palestine to stop was to allow Gazans the right to self-determination and to create a two-state solution. Just sold Gaza to Donald Trump. Just gave it over to him and his board of peace. Which, if you have $1 billion, you can join the board of peace and continue to sell out the people of Gaza. This is the last mode of ethnic cleansing for this. Since the October ceasefire, which hasn't been a ceasefire, there hasn't been a ceasefire in Gaza. There's been one people who stopped fighting and one people who have just been killing Palestinians. The Israelis have just continued to kill people, continue the genocidal tactics. 449 Palestinians have been killed and 1,200 injured in the Gaza Strip. In the West Bank, others have been killed as well as they continue to annex the West Bank and push Palestinians out. And this is all now under the guise of the United Nations too. It used to be the United Nations was kind of just a limp-wristed, hey, don't do that. But now it's becoming clear that it's more of a, yeah, we're just a wing of the United States. The United States pulled off its funding, and we don't really want to worry about it, and we want to continue to be able to make our cushy salaries and whatnot. So yeah, so that's what's been happening. The Board of Peace was established by a UN Security Council resolution, and now it has Tony Blair, Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, and Donald Trump on its board as he tries to get Sisi from Egypt and Etrigan from Turkey, as well as others, to join it. To completely biased figures who want to use, as Trump has touted forever, and Jared Kushner is a real estate developer who also really wants this, to try to sell off land of Gaza to wealthy Jews who will then determine that Gaza is now Israel and rebuild it for them. So yeah, that's pretty much what's been going on. That's what the hell has been going on recently. I would like to do more in-depth videos soon. Hopefully, I will have the time to do that, but I just wanted to get something out there to really quickly cover everything that's been going on because so much has been going on. But yeah, there are links in the description below for if you want to donate to Gazans and help them out as they continue to not have the supplies because Israel is still withholding supplies despite the agreement of the ceasefire and continue to be bombarded every single day with attacks and shooting. Uh, Something's got to change with the way we do things in this world, and if we don't, it's going to be catastrophic. Things are quite worrisome right now, and we got to start working together down here, us the lower and middle classes, because if we don't, then things are going to get beyond repair. Thank you so much for watching this video. I've been Zachariah. Consider liking and subscribing, and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.